History in general is usually focused on men, with a few women who have made it to be prominent or influential or some sort of noteworthy status. But why are they so difficult to find, even the rest of them? Well, because it was a man's world. As we learned in Courtney's presentation, men controlled just about everything. They ran the businesses, and the government was run by men, and documents were signed by men, and women were just kind of, on the side, doing their thing. It was customary for her to be in the home and raise the children, and if any woman did work outside the home, it was usually just to support the family income if she was married, if she was widowed, or it was to support herself. But most of the time, if she worked, she was either not yet married and maybe working as a teacher or something, or it was just a small job on the side to supplement the family's income, but not to support it. Name changes are some of the main reasons that women are difficult to track. They get married and their last name changes. They could petition to regain a maiden name or another surname if they got divorced. And one example I know of, there was a woman who had married several times. I believe there were 8 marriages to 7 different men. And she, at one point, she was a widow. She remarried, and then she decides to divorce this man and petitions the court in her divorce to go back to a different surname that was of one of her deceased husbands. So, and we would have only found that out by finding that particular divorce case and knowing that she had actually been married to that man before. Common law also allowed for a person to change their legal names as long as it wasn't for fraudulent reasons. Of course, what was considered fraudulent, we have no idea what they decided was fraudulent and what wasn't, or how they even determined that. But unlike today, it was not difficult for a person or a family to just kind of up and move to a new place, a new county, a new state, anywhere, and just kind of present themselves under a different name and still stay within society. They're still able to sign legal documents and contracts and everything, and just live like that until either someone finds out that that's really not their names or whatever. They didn't have to present their IDs. They didn't have IDs, so that was another issue that we have. Again, more information on names. If you come across in your evidence for your female ancestors that she has other names that she is known by, always search under all of them. Check every single name, nicknames, husband's names, initials, everything. Check every single one. Nicknames are interesting. In this example I have down on the bottom, Pocahontas King. In the very first census that she shows up on, she's an infant, and she is listed under a nickname Polky. Every single documentation I could find on her, all but one, listed her under a various form of her nickname. Pokey, Pokey, Polka. One even had Rosa, but it was a mistranslation, a mistranscription. So, but at first when I realized that, because I was like, where'd they get Rosa from? And or she was under a variation of her husband's name, and he was General something. I can't remember at the top of my head right now, but that was she was a bit difficult to find, but I found information on her nonetheless. They could also end up choosing to go by a different spelling from when they were a child to when they're an adult. They could, or a person putting it down on the census record or some other legal document may not have known how to spell the name and did not think to ask, so they just spelled it the way they thought it should be spelled. And also remember that spellings of names differ from country to country. So if your ancestor is fairly recent immigrant within, the last few generations or so, She may even have, she may have two different spellings of her name. She may have a family nickname that she goes by at home, and then her Americanized name that she goes by on legal documents. Or her family nickname could show up on legal documents as well, or church records, or any other kind of records that you can find, census records even, just as we see here. Husband's names and initials. My own grandmother's show up on newspapers. One, Miss Talmadge Eaves and her children. This was put in the newspaper. They were visiting some friends, and that's not her name. That's her husband's name, and she's actually a widow already at this point. He had passed away the prior year. And then another one, Miss R.S. Rayburn and baby boy are being dismissed from the hospital. That's not her name. That's her husband, R.S. Rayburn. Under certain circumstances, you might find a woman listed under her own initials. Most of the time you'll find this if she is in the business world, if she is running a business under her own name, or in newspapers, because they frequently shortened things to make everything, all the information they had fit sometimes, or they didn't have, they had a lot of information and not enough pages to put it on, or something like that. Or on some official government records, such as patents, inventors are usually listed only with their initials. And there were quite a few women who did actually invent things, but you wouldn't necessarily know that by just looking at the patent pages with the initials. Another thing real quick is, did she have a title, such as Nana June or Nurse Sanders or Widow Ball? These could also be helpful ways to search for her, like in newspapers and things like that, because that will also give you additional information. You might find a cool little article about her or something, or heaven forbid they post her death announcement or obituary under the name Widow Ball. You never know. So that's just another thing that works for men as well. If they're like Judge Stewart or Dr. Hopkins, you can throw that in there and find lots of different information like that, because you never know what they're going to call somebody when they put it in the newspaper. You just don't know. I have a website listed down here on the bottom right-hand side of the screen called behindthename.com. This is a recent discovery of mine, but it allows you to search different names, particularly first names, and it gives you all these different variations and possibilities depending on like where the person came from. It gives you different countries different spellings for all the different countries that may have used that name, and different nicknames that are possible. It's a really cool website. It's just a thing that, if you're not sure if she had a nickname, you can always try and see what kind of things are out there. Okay, here's one of our strategies. Something I have recently started doing a lot more. I had done it a little bit some. One thing is looking for the men. Fully document the lives of all the men in her family. Husbands, fathers, brothers, uncles, brother-in-laws, sister-in-laws, son-in-laws. I don't know why I said sister-in-laws, but hell, they might help too. I don't know, but usually I like to look at the men. You look at all the men. Look at all the men first, at least, and create a timeline. Timelines are great. I have an example here on the side. It's just a small portion of a timeline where I cited my sources as well, so that I could stay organized and know where everything came from. I just threw this together as an example here. In that timeline, you might want to add national, local, or even international events, because this can kind of help you determine maybe your ancestor decides to move because of a local drought or financial crisis or something like that. And of course, which leads me into the whole knowing your historical timeline of their lives. I mean, genealogy and family history is not just knowing your ancestors' names. I mean, we want to know the stories. And so in order to do that, you want to know the historical timeline. I mean, are you searching for someone who could have been a slave? Could she have been emancipated prior to the Civil War, or did she survive past the Civil War and that's what emancipated her? That could lead you to figure out what kind of records you would need to look for, probate records and such as that, possibly. Did something cause her to enter the workforce, the Great Depression, the World War II, or some other type of crisis? Was she a nurse in the Civil War? I mean, not very many documents for those, but there is some information out there, a little bit out there. Any kind of thing, anything like that, some sort of financial crisis. There was a financial crisis in the 1890s that could have caused her to have to go into the workforce, or her husband died, something like that. Did her husband serve in the military? Check pension records, widow's pensions, things like that. Was she an activist behind a cause? Was she a suffragist? Or part of some sort of local or national charity organization? You can check for those types of records as well. I'll mention them again here in a little bit, and a little bit more detail. Perhaps did she die young? That's another thing. If you can't find her and you think maybe she died young, I don't ever like to just assume things, but you can also, if that is the case and you do find that she does die young, there's not going to be necessarily a lot of records because of about her existence, just because she didn't have the chance. You may have to try looking for cemetery and burial records. Those can be very difficult to find. I understand they are usually held in private hands, private entities. And you have to kind of search those out. If the cemetery was affiliated with church, always ask the church. A lot of them are usually pretty good about letting you look at their records. If a father or a brother or somebody preceded her in death, check out their will or estate records. That could lead to further clues to help you connect those family links together. Even if you're not certain that it's her father or her brother, go and look through those probate records and look and see, does it list her under her married name? That gives you a real clue. Okay, I think I can connect these two. And let's find more evidence to substantiate that. You can also, emblems on headstones is another thing. It's kind of a rare, out of the ballpark thing, but those can help you figure out if they're like a religious affiliation, and then maybe narrow down possible churches for records there, a profession maybe, or some sort of membership. They're more common on men's headstones, but you never know, you might find something on a lady's. So search those graveyards, search the Find a Grave or Billion Graves websites. If possible, of course, always search the actual graveyard if you can. Never automatically assume anything. Always look for verification. Of course, knowing the laws, as we learned from Courtney's presentation, knowing the local, state, national laws, those are important, like common law versus civil law. Civil law coming over from mainland Europe and was practiced in Louisiana, and common law originating in England, where a woman had no legal rights, and we get the idea of coverture. All right, so the main questions that we get from when searching for our female ancestors: who are her parents? What is her maiden name? That is always the biggest deal. I want to know who this person's maiden name is. Okay, maiden name, usually you want to check for marriage records. Those will be held at the county or vital statistic levels. Normally, most of what you're looking for will most likely be on the county level, unless it's more recent, then you're going to have to deal with vital statistics. In some places, these record types are combined into one document. That's usually later on. Sometimes they get to be combined in one large document, or really early when there's like 3 lines of sentences that just say their names, who married them, and the date that they were married on, the date that they applied to be married, that kind of stuff. They're early on, and then it's like a page of like 12 other couples being married. So it just depends on the time period and how that county decided to record their information when they were told, hey, you got to record this. But these can also provide helpful clues. They could even possibly lead you to church records if a minister or a reverend is listed as being the one who married them. Try and research that reverend or that minister and see if you can't find church records. And then maybe that's the church she was born and baptized and grew up in. And then there you go, you got her family records. If you can't find, or you're not sure where to look for marriage records, check the census or check birth records if they are available, because that's not going to be always an easy thing to find, of their children, and just check the census and see what county she was listed in with her husband, and then broaden the search from there. That first county she's listed in closest to her marriage, check that county. If that doesn't work, check surrounding counties. If that doesn't work, check the entire state. If you can't find it in the entire state, check surrounding states. You never know. A woman could have been in another state, and they were like, hey, we know this man over in Alabama. We think you would be a perfect match. He's going to come and you're going to meet him. And then, hey, maybe they get married a few weeks later or months later or days or the same day. You never know. I've heard some crazy stories. Church records, again, check that. You can find sometimes find married parents' names if you can get a baptismal record or something like that, or at least a maiden name. Birth and death records, depending on the time period, again, 1908 or later in Alabama is going to be official birth and death certificates. But of course, you can find birth and death records or birth and death announcements sometimes, or things like that. But what we're really looking for is on those official ones, they will sometimes, if her children die after 1908, look for her children. And they may have the full name of their mother, or at least a maiden name for their mother on there. And then you have a clue that you can then go and search. Of course, you have to remember with death records, you have to know, okay, what person gave this information and were they right? Did they really know? Did they know that person who died well enough to give that information accurately? But it's still a clue, and you can at least eliminate it if it doesn't turn out. And again, on census records, look at surrounding families, because sometimes they settled close by the wife's family or something like that. But a lot of times, look at her children's names. They may have, like we heard with probate record in Courtney's record, people like to name their kids the same names as their siblings or their aunts and their uncles and their parents. And then their middle names, and in some cases, would be the wife's maiden name, or even the wife's mother's maiden name. I have discovered that in one family tree. So always look at those names. If you can get a middle name, it's real great. That could be really helpful. Sometimes you get those, sometimes you don't. Also, unique children's names. If there is like Hezekiah, or that's the only one I can think of right off the top of my head, or something like that, that's not very common, it could lead to other family members. Then we have land records that could help lead to possible family members of your female relative. This is also a time-consuming process. Land records are a little bit crazy to look through. Because women weren't really allowed to own land until the mid 1800s. You're gonna be looking for her husband's name, and if he has sold some land for a small amount of money, like $1 or some other small amount, or some kind of trade, it's very possible that the person selling them that land or trading with them is her parents, brother, or some other close relative, maybe an uncle of hers. That was a fairly common practice in the 1800s, to kind of give something from the wife's family to this new couple starting out. Then, of course, obituaries. I mentioned death records earlier. Obituaries, they're mostly helpful from the late 1800s to the present, but if they're prominent or influential, you might find something a little more detailed prior to that. That would give information about where they came from and where they got married. It might give a maiden name. It may give names of siblings that are still living. If you can get brothers' full names, then there you go. You got a maiden name. One thing I want to be mention right here, very certain, is always check multiple papers. Don't just check the one for that exact area where they died. Check the surrounding counties, see if perhaps she may have come from another county, or and or sometimes families post obituaries or death notices in other areas where they had a lot of family. So it's always a good idea to start small with those newspaper searches for those obituaries, and then kind of broaden it out and just see if some surrounding counties or somewhere else in the state or one of the nearby states, or if you already happen to know that part of her family is from this specific location, check that specific location, and then you might get more information on her. If you already have her maiden name and everything, but you're still looking for more information, check those locations as well. You never know. We have found obituaries that are posted in the Alabama newspapers for people who died in California and Texas, but they originated from Alabama, so their families posted them there. Again, probate records, like we were talking earlier. If you know her maiden name, go to that county's records and check every surname. Check the files of all the men with that surname. You might find a father or a brother. If you have an idea of what the father's name might be, go and check him. See if it lists her specifically if they die before she gets married, or after she gets married. I mean, if they die after she gets married, that could be your golden ticket right there that gives you the connection to the right parents. So search for those men of that same surname, and don't stop with just the wills. Again, start with the case files, go find the wills, go find the minutes. All that information can lead you to those clues and connect you to the right ancestor that you're looking for. Okay, other places that women can be found. First of all, not everything is going to be online, and unfortunately, nor will it ever all be online. It's a complicated process, unfortunately. There's just so much, millions and millions of papers. Some things are tucked away in small local archives, libraries, churches, funeral homes, and private hands. You just never know when something is going to get donated or where it will be donated. Find stuff relating to an Alabama family out in an archive in California. You never know. So other places that women can be found, of course, newspapers. We've discussed them quite a bit. There's those newspapers.com subscription site, or there's another site, Chronicling America, which is done by the Library of Congress. It's a free site that you can check as well. If you can't find a newspaper record, again, in that certain area, check adjacent cities or adjacent counties. They like to reprint things and fill space if they need to, or they may have been known in that area, and so they want to let those people know as well. Military records. I've got two examples here on the right-hand side of some military index cards. We've got, first, the top one is a World War II draft registration card that indicates one Archie Walter Hooker had a next of kin named Miss Zella Hooker. And they were in the boat. They were both living in the same location in LaPorte, Minnesota, and he was at age 43 on this record. So it's safe to conclude that this is possibly his wife. It could be a sister, you never know. So I went and I searched and I checked and I found Zella Hooker. I found their marriage record. She is his wife. On this one on the bottom, we've got several good clues here for a different Archibald Hooker. He applied for a pension in 1876 while living in Illinois. So we have a location, a date, and that he was receiving a Civil War pension. And then his widow, Margaret Hooker, who's listed, her name is listed up there. So we at least have a first name for his widow. She applied for the pension for the widow's pension in 1893 in Missouri. So we know that at some point she, and possibly him as well, moved from Illinois to Missouri. And we know that her first name is Margaret, and we can go and search for a maiden name as well. Or possibly more Civil War military records for him that may give further information, although I haven't found one that gives a maiden name for a woman. But hey, we at least got her name off of that, so that's a good thing. Another thing is naturalization records. A wife's citizenship was tied to her husband. It was derivative for women and children to just automatically get citizenship when the husband or father did, and that stayed in effect until 1922 when they repealed that law. There were some other iffy things here and there, but that was one of the main things. And then after that, women and children were all required to apply for individual citizenship. But before that, you might find on a man's paperwork for trying to become a citizen in their naturalization records, you might find the list of a wife or children or something like that. We do not have a lot of naturalization records at the state archives. Those are more of a federal level record, but they did have to go through counties. There just aren't that many of them, but that's just another type of record that you might be able to find something for. Of course, divorce records as well. Those are a court level record that you would most likely need to contact the courthouses for to get those. But those can help you get a maiden name, or if she petitions to go to a different surname or something like that. Check local societies. Perhaps you've heard a story that your great-great-grandmother was one of the first women in the area, helped start the DAR society there in that local area, part of a local women's group or a charitable organization, something like that you might find in a newspaper, or you may be able to find that chapter's records at a local archive or something like that. County histories can have clues that'll lead you to concrete evidence. I don't like to use county histories as exact evidence because they are not a primary source. They're recollections created by the people who it's been passed down to them. But it can provide you a clue of where, and then of a maiden name or surname or a possible family connection that you can then go and find the concrete evidence for. Look for diaries, letters, memoirs. Look for them not just for her, but for her extended family. Again, those can be difficult to find because you never know where they're going to be donated or if they're donated. So they could be in private hands. So you have to kind of use your networks, ask your relatives, older relatives if they're still available, cousins, DNA matches if you've done that, and just reach out to people and try and figure that out. I've never done DNA matching yet, and so I've never reached out to any of those people, but I do have my network of cousins and other relatives that I've been able to use. Real quick here, we've got some more strategies. These that will help organize and kind of keep you on the right path to finding your female ancestors. The fan club method, which is family, friends, associates, which associates is referring to business associates or church people, fraternal organizations, such as that, and then their neighbors. This just helps create a group of individuals who knew your ancestor and may in some way, may be some way related to them. If they may have had an interaction with them. So they may have been a witness your ancestor may have been a witness for them on a piece of land transaction or something. And that can actually help you narrow down locations or things like that. It just helps you find all the different types of things you're looking for. Also, whole family research, which is very similar to Fan Club, but it focuses mostly on the searching every single member of the family, not just those in the direct line, but brothers and siblings. Brothers are very useful, as are brother-in-laws, sons and son-in-laws, like I said earlier. Witnesses on documents could also be relatives. So always look at that witness line and make note of that name just in case, because it can help. I used to ignore that witness line. I don't anymore because I have used that technique and it helped me identify and verify the identity of a man I was looking for. So, and I've seen it work for women too. So there's some great information out there that can help you connect, especially if you find the same witness names on several types of documents. That's really helpful. Always, I like to create comparison charts as well. So if you have a person who has a fairly common name in the area, I was searching for Nancy Lawler for a patron for a while ago, and so I threw this. I put this spreadsheet together to show kind of some of the information I found when I was working with that patron, the information I was given, the marriage license I was able to find for Nancy and the George Davis Upton, and a Davis Upton. The George Davis Upton was the name I was given by the patron. And then there's this other column I added on here, which is assumed information. I don't like to assume things, but I put that there because there were a lot of people on Ancestry who think that Nancy C. Lawler, who married G. Davis Upton, and her parents must absolutely be Nancy Sis Bagwell and Hugh Gant Squire Lawler. I could not find a single document to confirm that. Not a single one. I found some census records of Hugh Grant and Nancy Bagwell, assume that family in Tuscaloosa County. They have no daughter named Nancy that was born in 1860 on any of those census records. So I really don't think that that's her parents, unless they, gave her away to somebody early on. But I also could not find any information about that either. So I had a couple of options. I have two different Nancys here on the left-hand side of this thing, where I've got some census records for these Nancys, and I've got some possible parents' names and some siblings' names, and I have spaces down here where you can put names of neighbors. Look and see if there's an Upton surname around. I had her maiden name Lawler, so you can look for that as well. And other surnames that appear on the census records. And this is just, you just kind of arrange it the way it makes sense to you when you try to put one of these things together, because organization is key when you're doing this. So document all the evidence, and remember that location matters. If you're like Nancy, she lived in a different county. These other Nancys lived in a different county, but they were not that far from Tuscaloosa County. So it was very possible that one of these Nancys came from that county, from Lamar County, and went to Tuscaloosa to marry George Davis Upton. Then one of them could be the right Nancy. So it's very possible that if people moved, you never know why, and they traveled because sometimes it was possible, it was necessary for life. They had to travel to do work, do business, to do different things, and to make a living. So just always keep things organized, and remember where you are. If all else fails, start fresh. Go back to the beginning, get that verified information that you have and the evidence, and then begin a new search. Come up with a clear research question. What is a maiden name? What is her maiden name? Who are her parents? Where does this person actually marry? Sometimes you have no idea where the person married. So have that clear question and focus on trying to answer that question. I know it sounds like I've just given you a whole lot of, just keep searching. And it's a lot of work. You just got to get it done. I know that's probably what it sounds like I've done to you, but I promise you it'll pay off. These strategies and these organization tips and things like that do really help. Timelines and comparison charts I find are really helpful, so you can get all that different kind of information in one place and look at it and see where there might be an empty spot or where there might be some information that lines up. And if you start fresh, you may find that you missed a good clue somewhere, or there was this mistake somewhere, and hey, you knew who their parents were all along. You never know. So lastly here, just real quick, this is an example of a timeline I've done for one of my great, I think 3 or 4 times great grandmother. I'd have to check. I'm working on her. I just created this timeline a few days ago with some of the information I know about her and some of the things I've found. I've added the Revolutionary War ending there a few years after her birth, her supposed birth. We believe that it's 1781. the records I found so far do concur with that. And a possibility of who her parents might be, but I have no idea if that's correct or not yet. So that's still a question I'm working on. In this other highlighted section, an 1850 census, I have not found a Guthrie as her son yet, so I'm not entirely positive that that is her living in her son's household in 1850. But again, I still have a lot of work to do. But I follow these various research steps. If you follow these general research steps, you can and use these various methods and remain organized. It'll help you through this long process of trying to find those elusive female ancestors. You know, gather what you know about your ancestor, determine those gaps, and form a research question. Identify the individuals who could possibly be your ancestor if they have similar names with people in the area, or identify and research that person's possible siblings, research their children, compare the documents with the evidence you have. That concrete evidence is good to have, and hopefully you can grow that concrete evidence side of your things and find that right person. Eliminate candidates and or eliminate information that you found that does not line up, that doesn't match. You eliminate those possibilities and repeat that until you only have one person left, or until all that evidence lines up and you have your ancestor's story. Again, it's almost a never-ending process. Just a few of the resources that I use a lot here, of course, Ancestry.com and FamilySearch.org. Both of them have excellent articles and videos and stories about finding your female ancestors as well. Even creating timelines, I learned a little bit more about timelines by watching some of that stuff available on Ancestry.com a few months ago after a conference. And then there's tons of genealogy sites out there. There's not necessarily one that's much better than the other. It's just Ancestry and Family Search have most of the legal documentation that you're going to be looking for. And some of those other sites have good information as well. I also use this Hidden Half of the Family, a source for women's genealogy. It was a book I recently acquired, and a lot of people have used it as well. It's fairly lauded. It has information at various laws and separated by state, things like that. And Google works. I couldn't tell you how many times somebody asked me a question and I just Google it all the time. So, and then of course us at the Alabama Archives, you can always call us and one of us will answer. We'll help you with your question or help put you in the right direction for what you're looking for. You can send us an email. I put my own email down there. If you have any specific questions about this this presentation, you can contact me. But you know, call us or submit a research request. If you just are at your wit's end and cannot find anything else, submit a research request on our website. I got over here on the right-hand side of the screen how to find that form on our current website. Go into the research tab, reference services, research request form, fill that out. $15 for in-state, $25 for out-of-state, and we'll search through the records that we have, and we'll go through our microfilm, and we'll see what we can find. So there we go. Thank you for watching. That is the end of my presentation. Again, if you want to check out this presentation again at a later date, it'll be posted on our YouTube channel, and we have other presentations about genealogy as well on our YouTube channel. So check out that site. There's a link to it on our main website to get to our YouTube channel. So you don't have to search for it. You just go to our archive website, Alabama Department of Archives and History. Just search that in Google and then click on that YouTube link, and it'll take you right to it. So let me stop sharing here. Sharing. There we go, and we'll have some questions. We've got some questions here. see if I can see all those. I don't know if I can. Okay. All right. So, yes, for family tree structures and things like that, there are some ones on Ancestry that I do like. I like using, they've got a couple of tree situations there, like the 4 generations. I've seen a 5-generation tree. And then I don't have any particular genealogy software, but I'm thinking more paper trees on Ancestry and the family forms. The family group sheets, I like those. I don't have any particular genealogy software that I use or that we use here at Auto. But if you're looking for a paper tree or something like that, I do like Ancestries that they provide there. Let's see, Martha says, what was the newspaper website other than newspaper? Okay, that was, let me make sure, Chronicling America. It's done by the Library of Congress. So if you just search Chronicling America, let me find it here and I'll spell that for you. Where'd my newspapers page go? Oh, not that one. I have it. Look through my notes here. Newspapers. Okay, that's CHRONICLING and then America. It's a free site. It's put together by the Library of Congress. I know a lot of archives around the country have supplied information to them, and they've gotten information directly from newspapers as well. So that's a program and a project that the Library of Congress. It's an ongoing project, just like any other website. Do we have any other questions? Let's see. Looks like I have something in the Q&A here. It looks like we have something back from Courtney's. Okay, here's one that relates to mine, and then we'll go back to that one that I think relates more to Courtney's presentation. Typically, when were marriage licenses instituted? Like the actual license given to the couple, I believe in the 1800s. In Alabama, I think it was put on the law books later, but for marriages to be recorded, that it was actually put on the law books later than what they were actually recording them at. So I believe some of the earliest marriage records you can find go back to statehood. And I think we have a few territorial records and some of the county information as well. So I hope that answers your question, John. And then Courtney, do you see this question here? How do you locate the address of a property? I believe you were talking about land information back there, and I think I remember seeing this question before.
I actually can't see that one, so that may have been directed to you specifically, because I've received a couple of questions just to me that you probably can't see. Can you read the question for me?
This is, how do you locate the address of a property?
So typically in deeds or in land transactions, you're not dealing with an address. You're actually working with the legal description of the land, which in Alabama goes back to the public lands system, where originally the federal government did a grid system across the state, and they broke the grid into township, range, section, and then sections of sections. And we're going to have a separate presentation. I think it might be either next month or in October. I think it's September. In our September presentation, we're going to have an entire workshop dedicated solely to land and researching land ownership. But the very quick answer is, if you're looking for a house, specific house in a city, you might be able to look in the city directory and find a street address for it that way. But if you're researching land ownership, you're going to be in Alabama. It's different other states, but in Alabama, you're going to be working off of the township and range public lands system, and you're going to be working with starting with land patents and then moving forward with deed transactions at the county level. And you're going to be just kind of following the legal description of the land that way. I hope that answers your question.